Before I start, I just want to say I had an amazing day yesterday. It felt like a really special experience to be here. Mark described Beyond Tellerrand as, exploring things that are outside of your purview of expertise in this single track environment. And I feel like we owe Mark a round of applause because he's given us all a gift. Clearly there's a lot of care and craftsmanship that goes into this event, and it's just a treat to be here. So, I just want to say thanks. But so, as Mark said, I work for a company called MailChimp. We're based in Atlanta. It's an email company. And I've been there for a long time. I've been there, a long time in terms of technology, software industry. In January, it'll be 8 years. And over that time, I've learned a fair bit about building software teams, building design teams, because I've had to do it multiple times. But when I started, it was just me. I was essentially just a team of one, which is not entirely accurate because I was working with a lead engineer who was doing all of the server-side stuff, lots of incredible development. He's a super genius sort of guy to work with. It was a real pleasure. But I was the only designer, and it turns out I was doing multiple things, wearing multiple hats. I was working on the marketing side, and I was working on the app, and that required me to do three things. I had to do research, and I had to do UI design and marketing site design. And I did a fair bit of development, actually. I did a lot of front-end development, mostly HTML and CSS. And wearing multiple hats is great because it helps you see the big picture and how things fit together. I learned a lot about being the team of one, but I'll admit it can be pretty stressful because you're trying to do so many things, and it's hard to do all of those things really well. And it got to the point where I was having a hard time keeping up, and I needed to start to hire people and build a team of people that could do these things. And that led me to question and wonder, who do I hire first? How do I choose to build this team? I thought carefully about what my day looked like, day to day. What was I spending most of my time on? What was I struggling to keep up with the most? And I came to the conclusion that a designer would be the biggest help in starting off this team. So I hired a designer, someone who was very junior, was young, he was actually still in school, but yet really talented and a good collaborator. And as time went by, I was able to hire a front-end developer and build up this, front-end and design team. And then as time went on and I had a little bit more bandwidth, I got some more time to do the research that I always wanted to do. I feel like, a lot of us in this room, if you're working in design or development, you often have questions of like, am I making the right thing that's the best thing for the product, for the customer, for the market? I have no idea, and so you guess and you operate on a lot of assumptions. Wouldn't it be nice to actually know who your customer is, know what they're trying to do, and have some context for your work, because it's very hard to be a good designer without that context. So I wanted research to be an important part of this team. I wanted it to be baked in from the very beginning. And that meant me doing some research myself. I was building some prototypes, and putting those in front of customers and getting feedback, so doing some usability testing early on, and talking to a lot of customers, which taught me a ton, a lot, and I still do that. I just got back from a trip to Portland where I met with customers, and when I get back home to the States, I'm hopping on another airplane to go to New York to visit more customers. So these three pieces, as I reflected on my day, they were so essential to building a design team. When you think of the idea of a design team, you think it's just designers. But to me, I needed more connection between these different pieces. And the reason why I had this perspective is that I had seen that when research and design and development are kept separate, there's a lot of miscommunication. Teams don't work well together. They don't collaborate well together. A lot of things fall through the cracks. A lot of People get confused about what's happening in the other team. There's not a lot of serendipity in how people collaborate. It's just, it's a lot of handoffs and very clumsy handoffs that get botched. Designers that make something that's ill-informed, it's not really related to customer experience and what they need. Developers building things, feeling like they're having to take what the designer gives them and just execute and not feeling like a partner in the process. And that hurts morale. People feel bad. They don't enjoy their job. And they make things and then the designers get disgruntled because it wasn't executed as well as they'd like. So there's a lot of communication breakdown when these different pieces are kept separate in separate teams. And I wanted to have something different. I wanted to scoot these things together, have them fit in a single team, so the handoffs would be elegant, not clumsy. They'd bounce from team to team, team member to team member. Researchers would present information to designers that would educate them so they can make better work. But then that designer would go ask the researcher questions, that it goes back and forth. And developers could be involved in the process too. And what I found in building my first team that way is the byproduct was respect. Respect is such an important part of creating a great product, great website, great design, because as Scott was talking about yesterday, and I heard Steve and Mark talk about it too, user experience is complicated. It's multifaceted. It's all of our responsibilities to contribute to that. And if we're divided, it's very hard to create a unified, elegant experience for our customers. So finding ways to build this team together built respect so people could work together, collaborate more effectively. And that's what I did. I pulled these teams together, and that's worked out for us so far. So I mentioned that research was an important thing early on that I really wanted to bake in, and I want to take a moment to talk about that because oftentimes I've heard when I talk to other people at different companies or I come to a conference and maybe do a workshop, I often get the question, how do I convince my boss that we should be doing research? That this should be an important part of design, right? You guys hear that? Yeah? This is silly to me. So let's just break this down for a second. The logic of the boss, it says, we don't have time for research. We need to take all of our time and resources, put all of our people on a project based on a lot of guesses so we can put this out in the market. Guessing is our best strategy. That sounds like a mess to me. It sounds like a recipe for destruction. Research is cheap and fast and easy to do. You can go super in-depth or you can be light and get some insights with what you've got to work with on your timeline. So it's a really important thing for a couple reasons. And I mentioned this in a talk about design teams because I just feel like we're setting designers up to fail if we don't give them the context they need to inform their work. One of the reasons why it's so critical to do research is that as a designer, we need to stay connected to our audience, know who they are. They have lots of backgrounds. They come from lots of different places. They have specific jobs to be done at different points in their life. And we're trying to build products, things that fit into their life, that help them do something, complete a task. And when you stay connected to customers by talking to them, sometimes it's a quick Skype call for 15 minutes. Do you have 15 minutes in your day to talk to a customer? Chances are, yeah, you could do that. You could get on the phone and talk to someone. It's not that hard. Send an email and say, hey, do you have 15 minutes to talk to me on Skype? I just want to hear how you're using the product, or I just want to hear how your business works. And that gives you the context you need to make better work. But when you start to do this, and maybe it's a survey or something, you start to find weirdos. Weirdos are very interesting. I love weirdos. Weirdos are the people that are using the things that you make in strange ways. So if you're making a product, they're hacking it. They aren't getting what they need out of the product, so they use your API and they connect it to if this then that, or they connect it to some other service. They start to plumb together things so they get what they need. These are people that have a picture of your future for you, if you just ask. You don't have to guess about your future. Wouldn't it be cool if we made this thing? I think it might be. If you're saying, I think, that's probably a tip-off that you're in dangerous territory. But when you find these weirdos, they're going to give you the insights that help you see what the future could be. It could be as immediate as, the next 6 months we want to make a feature that solves a problem for these people. That's useful. Or it could be, I see far in the future. I have a beacon on the hill. I've talked to some weirdos, and they have a really interesting picture of what we could be down the road. So I'm always looking for those people. And when I do a survey, I try to keep them short, and I always conclude with a question that's very open-ended. Anything else you want to tell us? This is an opportunity for the weirdos to raise their hands. And then I just send them an email and say, hey, can I talk to you on the phone? 15 minutes. And you learn a lot. Another reason why research is so critical to design is that it makes us feel pain. It's good to feel pain as a designer. And I think we inflict a lot of pain on ourselves as designers. Designers like to think that they're apathetic and thinking about the customer, but I often see that they're the exact opposite. They're trying to be empathetic, but they're actually apathetic. When you're a designer and you're working in perfect conditions, you're working on a really fast, brand new machine with a great monitor. You've got a fast internet connection. You've got your headphones on so you're not interrupted. You don't have sunlight coming in that's interfering in your monitor. Your coffee is perfect and warm. You got the tunes jamming and you're feeling good. Yeah, of course you can figure out how to use your product really well because everything's perfect. But guess what? The world ain't perfect. The world just isn't perfect. People are operating in situations that are painful and complicated. They have distractions. They're in suboptimal conditions. They've got people interrupting them. They're on an airplane with their laptop battery about to die on them, so they've got to dim down their monitor as low as it can go to try to get to the next stop. They're in situations that are more complicated than yours. I hear from designers, yeah, our customers are so lazy, they just won't read. It says it right there on the screen. They're not lazy, they're busy, they're living life. Things are coming at them, they're trying to figure stuff out. The world does not center around you. It doesn't. So for designers to see people use their product, to take the moment to put someone in front of your product, you can capture it on video with something like Silverback, or sometimes we actually have people come in, we just buy lunch for them, for a small team of people, and we watch someone try to do something in our app. And it looks a little bit like this. We just sort of throb and squirm in our seat. It's painful as we watch them get confused and frustrated and lost and pissed off. And afterwards, guess what we do? We run, we don't walk, back to the studio to go fix it. We fix it. We fix it as fast as we can because it hurts. It hurts to feel someone else's pain. But if you want to make great products and you want to create a culture of empathy inside of your team that stays connected to your customer, this is what you have to do to sand off the edges. You have to think about refinement. You have to make incremental improvements as you go forward. It's not always about putting new things into what you make. It's about refining what you have as well. And it's a competitive advantage, because a lot of people, their guns are only faced forward. They don't have any guns faced backwards. And you have people coming up behind you in the rearview mirror competing against you. And they're probably really smart and really talented, and we live in an age where there are a lot of great tools that make it easy to make good products. You've got to create a great product. And to do that, you've got to train your team to get in the habit of refining. Phil Lieben, who's the former CEO of Evernote, and sort of an ironic deliverer of this message, he said that the best product companies in the world have figured out how to make constant quality improvements part of their essential DNA. I find this ironic because it's actually something that Evernote has struggled with. They've always been facing forward. They're adding new things to their product, but not really refining the basic things, like let's make sync work. Let's just make note-taking really good, right? Refinement is core to making great products, and you've got to get your team in the habit. It's like calisthenics. You've got to get them trained to refine the product, to make sure that you're fending off competitive threats. I learned the most about my customers and how to lead the team in the design process when I get away from my desk. And sometimes that means driving over and meeting someone in town who's a customer, or it means hopping on a plane and going to visit them. Last year, we traveled 100,000 miles to 3 continents to visit customers. It's something we invest in, and I'll admit, where I work, this is weird. Most places we just don't get to do that. But I'm lucky enough that I get to do this, and I learned so much about our customers by going into these places where they work, seeing the suboptimal conditions, learning how they work, learning how their businesses operate, and oftentimes that's the conversation. Just tell me what a day looks like for you. How do you measure success? What kind of tools do you guys use? When you choose a tool, how do you choose it? Where do you get recommendations? How do you fit things together? Just asking how people are solving problems. It's not specifically about how do you use our product. It's more about getting the context, the big picture of what they're doing and how a business works. When you start to do this on a regular basis, patterns emerge, and you start to understand different phases of business, different phases of the customer experience, and their job to be done shifts when they're at these different points in time. And that can help you see the future in a really great way, too. So research is an important thing to bake into the design team, in my judgment. But the real goal of research is not to go out there and just collect a lot of findings, because if you're bundling that into a 30-page document, I have done this quite a few times in my life, I've discovered that people don't really want to read 30-page documents. They have other things on their nightstand than my reports. So the real goal of research is to turn findings into stories. Stories are really an important part of what we do as designers. We're telling stories. Steph's going to talk about that more here in just a minute. But I wanted to share with you an example of how we turned research into a story that guided a design team. It's about 2.5 years ago. We were working on a big redesign of MailChimp, and simultaneously we were doing a lot of customer research and discovered that mobile devices were really changing the way people work. I know that sounds very obvious and sort of a no shit Sherlock sort of thing. But it was shifting the way that people work. It was giving people the sense of found time. Because I have a device with me all the time, I can keep my work going and I can get things done faster. What do people do with that found time? They don't go hang out and relax. They fill it with more to-dos. So their to-do list gets bigger. And because they're handing off tasks from device to device, and they've got more things to do, and they're overwhelmed and stressed out, what do? They pass it to other people in their colleagues in their workplace. So work becomes more fluid, and it becomes more collaborative. And we had to rethink MailChimp for that workplace. And we created a small video. We hired some actors. We shot this in about 1.5 weeks, super cheap. When I say we hired some actors, some of these people are just friends we knew. It was like, hey, could you play this part? It's super cheap, super fast, and here's the story. This was our beacon on the hill. Make a short video, super cheap, and post it on our server that gives us a URL that we can drop in a chat room. There weren't a ton of meetings. We've never been really good at that sort of thing. I can give this to the mobile team, product team, executive team, anybody, and I can say, this is the way that people work these days. Here's what we need to build. What you don't see in here is a spec UI. I don't know what the product's going to look like. I just know how people behave, and I need to show people that. I need to turn that into a story so people know what to design. So it's cheap and easy to do and can be really powerful. Push things forward. Process is something that's often discussed in design teams, and I'll be honest with you guys, it gives me the heebie-jeebies because process often turns into a religious conversation about Agile, you should be using Agile. It's the right thing to do. And, you know, I feel like systems are important for us. They give us some best practices, but usually what happens is best practices are snuggly blanket that we cuddle so we can stop thinking and just follow what everyone else tells us to do. And to me, that's dangerous territory. So I'm interested in process, but only as a vehicle to make a really great product. I'm more interested in how I get there than following a particular process. That said, I'll share with you 3 things that have worked well for me in design teams and trying to fit these things together. Those 3 different buckets of folks, the researchers and the designers and the developers, being closely connected and respectful and collaborating, well, they kind of work in different ways. Their time intervals don't comfortably fit into a sprint. And what I hear from a lot of folks that are practicing Agile is that we didn't really get to think through the design and iterate as much as we would have liked to because the sprints are so tight. So speed is this, you know, attractive quality, but we have to also recognize that there's a point at which speed comes at a price. How good is the product? What's the quality of the product that we're trading off there? And so I've discovered that parallel processes, thinking about the way these teams work in parallel processes is helpful. Helpful for my team to understand how they fit in, and helpful for me to facilitate the communication and orchestrate the movement. If you're a researcher, you're diving into deeper questions. That does take time if you're having to hop on planes and do some deeper study, and that can be a longer cycle. UI designers often want to know ahead of time what are the next couple things we're going to be working on so I can start thinking about that and working through those things so we can have critical discussion and explore lots of different ideas. And developers are executing and building and refining and optimizing, and they often fit nicely into that agile, quick sprint structure. But we need to think about how research and design and development, how these things plug in and facilitate, you know, communication between them. So parallel processes are handy. Momentum is a really key thing with teams. They need rallying points like deadlines. When designers, most anybody really, operates without constraints, they feel like they're wandering in the desert and they don't know what's next. You don't have the opportunity to feel a sense of accomplishment, achievement, something that brings the team together, like a we did it moment. So setting deadlines and making those clear to the team is important. So they've got something to shoot for. They can push things forward. When they complete that, they can celebrate and move on to the next thing and feel a sense of accomplishment. Deadlines are good things. We've been experimenting with something I call lateral design. You might have a different name for this. I don't know what to call it other than this, but when we have a big feature that we're working on that's got some complexity to it, needs a lot of iteration and exploration, or we're working on a new product, we create small multidisciplinary teams, not unlike what you heard Mark and Steve describe yesterday. Small teams of cross-disciplinary folks that work closely together. And instead of it being very waterfall-y or very linear, it's lateral, where things move back and forth. It's like passing a baton from person to person, where a researcher has findings and passes it to a designer works on a UI that a developer builds. The developer enhances that. That can even go back into Photoshop and be refined again, and go back into development again. That will lead to additional questions for a researcher. So this lateral design of passing things back and forth in a fluid way puts everybody on equal footing. And it generates a lot of respect, a lot of empathy for our colleagues. That's a really important thing, to just get your colleagues and have a sense for where they're coming from and what motivates their behavior. What I've learned about design teams over the years is the process part is actually the easiest thing. The hardest part is the people bits. People are complicated. And it all starts with how we hire. I feel like it's something that we collectively know is very difficult. Many of you in this room are probably involved in the hiring process, either making the decision or interviewing people. I'm surprised we don't talk about this more. And I see hiring is so broken. This is how you build your team. What you put into your team is a measure of of the quality of the product that you're going to produce. But usually when we start the hiring process, we begin with a checklist of skills. They need to be able to write PHP. They need to be able to know Node. And they're a great UI designer, and they've got 10 years of experience, and they can make a mean mac and cheese. It's like all these things that have to be crammed together in a very unrealistic package that deter great candidates from applying. And I want you to just stop and think for a minute. If you've been fired, or you've seen someone get fired, or you've had to fire someone, was it because their HTML wasn't very good? Was it because their design was not totally refined? Chances are it was probably something else. It was a soft skill. They said inappropriate things at the meeting. You just can't say that stuff in front of people. Or they're just antisocial, like they just wouldn't collaborate with anyone. They wanted all the Legos for themselves. They wanted to control and get credit. All these soft skills, we need to be thinking less about checklists of skills. Make that secondary. We do need to know what people bring to the table, but make that secondary and focus on the person. Who are they? What's their personality like? Are they going to be a good fit for the team? What I do with hiring is I have an initial call as a screener to see if this person's crazy. If I discern that they are not crazy, we move on to the next phase where we have another call, which is usually an hour long, and I've got somebody else in there with me. So if it's a design hire, I'll bring in one of our designers to ask questions. We talk for about an hour, and there's a little bit of talk about your work and your experience, but there's a lot of talk about their background and their interests. And if that goes well, then we bring them in for a full day. We make time to spend a full day with this candidate. We make them sign an NDA usually, and we tell them everything we're working on, and we invite them to critiques, and we invite them to meetings, and we take them to lunch, and we create informal situations where they can let their guard down and just be themselves. It's easy to fake your way through a 1-hour interview. It's really hard to fake your way through a whole day of informal hanging out. And it's a great way for a team to understand when this person enters the team, is everything going to blow up? So we need to learn more about the people, focus more on the people, and make the skills part secondary. Simon Sinek said this really in a really great way, that if you hire people just because they can do the job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, They'll work for you with blood, sweat, and tears, and I believe this to be very, very true in my experience. When I focus my hiring process on the person first, I'm looking for beliefs, trying to understand their background, understand these soft skills. That's where I know if they're a right fit and if they're going to grow and stay with the company. I need to think about who they are in 5 years at the company. So soft skills, how do we screen for this or measure this? I know everyone wants to measure things. It's not really a measurable thing, and that's okay. It's okay to not have a number associated with everything. Soft skills are some of the things that I look for. I look for adaptation. Is this person adaptable? And the way that this comes to the surface is through conversations that are informal, of like, a lot of times when you just make space to hang out with someone, they'll tell you things like, yeah, I grew up in a rural part of Iowa, and I didn't really fit in very well. So, I moved around a lot, and when I moved around, I had to either be funny or I had to learn to fight, and I decided I wasn't a very good fighter, so I'd have to learn to be funny. That's a very enlightening story if people volunteer these sorts of tidbits, which, again, if you make the space, it often comes out. Because that tells me that this person, when they're in a moment, a space of adversity, they will adapt and find a way forward. That is a great skill for someone in a design team, because they will have adversity. Things are going to change. The company will change, the product direction will change, expectations may change, their career is going to change. Is this person someone who has grit, that can see things long term and stick with it? That's an important thing for me. There have actually been times where I've hired someone knowing they have massive skill deficiencies, but they're so good at these soft skills like adaptation. I can't coach this. I can't teach someone to be adaptable. I can teach someone HTML. That's easy. I look for diversity of thought. I can't hire people like me. That feels that's our default, is to hire people like us, because it feels comfortable and familiar and safe that I could hire someone who's like me, who looks like me, has a similar background, who thinks like me. But I'm telling you, this is the way to make a heterogeneous, small-thinking team. If we want diversity of thought, you have to bring in people around you who have diverse experiences. This is Victoria Breskel, who's an associate professor at Yale studying organizational behavior. And we see it time and time again. There's lots of studies out there about diversity of perspectives, diversity of teams, creates a richer, creative environment where we can innovate and discover new things faster, and in ways we couldn't have anticipated if we're just trying to build teams that are like us. If we're in charge of hiring or involved in hiring, we need to actively train our minds to think about finding people that are not like us. Sometimes you find someone who's actually really better than you, a candidate who's smarter than you, has more impressive experience. Their skills might be really incredible. Your impulse may be that I shouldn't hire this person because what's that going to do to me? People are going to look at me as like a fraud. I'm going to be found out as a fraud. This is an internal dialogue that, I don't know, maybe you've had this before. You need to fight this instinct and actually invite in people that are much smarter than you, that are better than you. This is a great opportunity for you to grow as an individual because they're going to challenge you. And it's okay to not be the best at everything. It's okay to be growing just like everyone else in your team. And what this is going to do for your team is it's going to be like a power pill. Because a really talented person that comes into a team is going to inspire other people to grow as well. As long as this person comes in with a humble heart, not grandiose expectations that you should all listen to me and I'm going to dictate what's happening, that clearly will change the dynamic of a team. But if it's someone that's really talented and humble, it's a great opportunity for you and your whole team to grow. Some lessons that I've learned over the years that maybe they're leadership related or maybe they're just sort of life related. I wish I would have known 8 years ago when I started at MailChimp and I started building teams. I wish someone would have told me that I need to talk to every single person on my team one-on-one, a one-to-one meeting on a regular basis. Making space for people to tell me what's on their mind. What are they concerned about? What are they afraid of? What are they feeling good about? How's the morale in the team? How do you feel about where we're going? What do you think about the company's direction? Making space for conversations like that is so important. It's a great way to head off problems before they occur. Problems like a deadline's going to slip. When you have these one-on-one meetings, spend 30 minutes or an hour with a team member, and they're describing some challenges that they're having in the team where they're getting confused. Or maybe there's something political that's bubbling up, a conflict. Or maybe they've got something heavy that they're dealing with at home. Those are probably predictors of some issues that are going to happen in the team. You don't want to find that out when the deadline hits. It's the day, and you don't have what you expected to have. One-on-one conversations are where you head off those problems. If you've ever had someone leave suddenly and it just comes out of the blue and you're just wondering, how the hell did that happen? I thought this was going so great. You were so happy. You probably weren't spending enough time with that person, talking to them, giving them what they need, helping them grow, helping them push their career forward. You weren't listening to what they needed. I didn't know this for 6 years. I've only been doing one-on-one meetings for the past 2 years-ish. But it changed everything for me and my team. I always just thought like a team meeting where people talk about what they're doing is enough. One-on-ones are really the way to go. I actually use a service called 155. That's 15five.com. And it emails everyone on my team an individual email with a link to a short series of questions. It's like 5 questions. And it's not about your to-do list. Give me a progress update. It's not about that. It's like, what's the morale of the team? Any superstars this week? People that are doing really well? It takes them 15 minutes to complete that thought at the end of the week. It takes me 5 minutes to review, and it makes it easy for me to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in my team. It's really important to match the right people with the right project. I've learned this the hard way. I have a really talented designer that I've managed over the years. He's brilliant. He's young. He's got tons of ideas. He is just energy embodied in a designer. He experiments and explores with a lot of things. And so if I brought him in early on in a project, he was such an asset. We would find new areas to explore that we would have missed otherwise. But there was a time where we were coming towards the end of a project and we just needed more hands on deck to help, pull things through. And so I invited him in to help us work through some UI refinements. And he started proposing lots of new ideas. We could do it this way. And he didn't have any context of what we've already been through. And he didn't really understand the deadline was just around the corner. We need to execute right now. It's not time for exploration. We've already been through that phase. And basically, he sort of dropped bombs where people were just like, holy shit, we're not going to get this done. There's like all these ideas of things we could be doing. I feel like we just need to get done what we said we were going to do. I put the right guy on the wrong project. And, knowing that, now I know where to put him. And that's been a lesson going forward. In those one-on-one meetings, I always have a candid conversation with people and say, this is your superpower. This is what you're really good at. Do you know that? This is your kryptonite. This is where you're not so good. That's coaching. That helps them know what they can do better. But it also gives them a cue to know when to pass the baton to someone else. This is my superpower. Now we're out of my superpower space. I'm going to give it to someone else where this is their superpower. That's an important part of building collaboration into a team. When you're the leader of things, you're going to be wrong. You're going to make mistakes. We're all infallible. We don't totally understand everything about the world. It's just impossible. Sometimes that's a hard thing to accept because you don't want people that report to you to know that you're wrong about something. You worry that they won't trust you, they'll lose faith, you'll look incompetent. But it turns out people will actually trust you more if you're just honest and transparent with them. If you tell them, you know, I thought I saw this. I thought I saw it really clearly, and it turns out I was wrong about this. But here's the lessons that we learn here and how we move forward. And it's actually okay to solicit feedback. Sometimes it's best to do that in a private way in that one-on-one meeting. What could I do to make your work better? What could I improve on? It's great to create that sense of trust and connection with your team members. It's okay to be wrong. It's a scary thing, but it's okay to do. I asked some friends in preparation for this talk people that had been leading design teams and built design teams over the years and what they learned. And related to this idea of being wrong and not knowing everything, because it's impossible. My friend Matthew Smith, who's a designer, an entrepreneur guy, he said that what he discovered over the years is that, he said, my job was not to know everything, it was to be more curious about everything than anyone else. And I love this because it takes the pressure off of us to be right and to know everything. Especially as your team grows, that's going to become increasingly more difficult. We just have to be curious. We just have to ask a lot of questions. And when we ask a lot of questions, we actually are doing something really important. We're modeling the behavior that we want to see with our team. If I'm curious and asking questions all the time, if I'm asking dumb questions sometimes of like, okay, just walk me through this. Why is this a good idea to do? Questioning assumptions. Guess what? Your team is going to be more comfortable questioning assumptions and potentially, helping you see the path forward more clearly. So modeling behavior is an important part of building your design team. How do I want these people to behave? It's not a matter of being directive and telling them. You have to show them. So I've been at this for a while. I've built a number of design teams. I'm actually in the process of building another one right now. And even with some experience, I gotta be honest with you, I have a lot of questions. I still have a lot of things I'm trying to figure out that I don't quite understand just yet. I'm taking notes. I'm muddling my way through, trying to figure it out on my own. But the one thing that I feel confident about is that you're finding the good in people, finding their superpowers, treating them with respect, empowering them to do their best work by putting them on the right project, helping them see how they fit together, helping them see that humility and collaboration is key to making really great products. If I can do that, we can make some really great stuff. Thanks, guys.